In a nutshell, it's not that much money, and a lot of good comes from it. I've always been, not looking at it as a competitive advantage, I've looked at it more as, you need to support an organization that provides the framework for your industry. My name's Mike O'Brien. I've had a real estate license for over 40 years. I came into real estate intending to run a brokerage company. I was never very good at sales, and fortunately that's not a skill you need in order to be a broker. So I've done this now for about 40 years as a broker, as an independent. I think that our company, grew very fast in the beginning. We got larger than we needed to be. We had 10 offices and we covered all of Anne Arundel and PG, and so we cut back. I sold that half of the company up north, and I wanted to be a sort of a home-based real estate company and just deal in Southern Maryland. And so that strategy has worked well for me because it's allowed me to be able to run the company without having to resort to a big payroll and a lot of overhead structure. So I'm kind of that mid-sized company, and I think we do a good job, and we have extremely high-quality salespeople. SMAR was a relatively, I think it was 1 year old when I got in the real estate business. And it was a very social group. We had great meetings, usually 3 or 4 times a year, where all of the brokers and a lot of the salespeople all came together for the meetings. And they were usually involved good food and alcohol. So, it was a social event as well as a business event. And that fostered a sort of air of camaraderie. We were competitors, but we were friendly competitors. And most of us, saw the other brokers outside of the real estate business. And it was a great time to be involved. So the board needed to go through some steps, and I was there. I served as a director. I also made the sales managers that worked with me, all 6 of them, contribute at the board level. And I thought that was important. And it allowed us to take some giant steps forward, adopting, when I started in the business, every broker had their own form. And every company had different forms depending on what part of the area they were from, and they had different customs and practices. So we tried to take our forms and upgrade them through the use of outside attorneys, and we finally were able to get through a lot. I'd say Judy Zimborski contributed a lot. She was able to convince the board we should have a standardized form and a standardized index. And that worked out really well. So that was the first big leap forward, because now we could rely on the contract not having any language that was ambiguous or hard to discover, and it made things work out better for salespeople. Quicker reviews, quicker responses. And then we carried that forward and went into other areas like lockboxes, and certainly that's changed our world a lot. And the MLS got, when I started, it was a book of pages, and you got a new MLS printout every week. And we used to have to update the book during the week for new listings, so it was kind of a tedious, cumbersome process. But now, with the electronic information, so long as everybody plays by the rules, it works really well. And you have to remind yourself that, every company gives you fair and equal access to their listings in exchange for you giving them fair and equal access to their listings. So I think, the board's doing a really good job with that, and hopefully, it'll continue into the future. Other advances, I was involved in building this building, making the commitment as a group of business people to borrow the money and to do it. It was a big step. Probably doesn't have the same utility today as it did back in the 80s, 90s, but it gave us a place to come together, and it was a huge asset all the way through 2000, and I guess we'll continue to be. If we ever get back to meeting as groups, which I hope we do. Every profession has to have a code of ethics, otherwise it's not a profession. And that code, is embodied in the rules and regulations that we operate by. And the board is our method of co-oping. It is a very important element of our business as far as providing better quality service to the public. I was against the decision to treat visits to websites as if they were visits to the office, which allows a person to use everyone else's listings on their website. I didn't think that played to the strength, of our company, but it was a decision that was made, and we went along with it, and that's the way the business is today. So now we have that problem with, we have a lot of third-party companies identifying buyers and sellers ahead of us and then selling that information to us in very high cost of 45+% referral rates. So I think the board's importance now is greater than ever, because we have to have a way to connect one-on-one with the buying and selling public, and not, fall victim to these companies, that are trying to not provide any service, just sell information back to the real estate community. Once the train leaves the station, it's kind of hard to change the course. We have to, agent-based business as opposed to assigned or referred business is what guarantees our success. And I think we need to focus on that moving forward. The effort that we make every year, especially with RPAC, is important. I became a life member of RPAC way back, and I don't really participate in the meetings, but I do contribute every year. And I think that that has allowed us to mitigate some of the crazy proposals that come through the Maryland House and Senate. We are dealing with some of the downzoning consequences of smart growth and the treatment of the rural areas, the RPD in St. Mary's and the reserved areas in Calvert County and Charles. That's an actual taking, in my mind, of value from families because they didn't develop earlier. But that's way over now. We're going to deal with that from this point forward. But I think it would have been much worse if the board hadn't intervened and we didn't have a good relationship with our local representatives. Different decisions in different areas, people have different opinions, but the most significant thing that happened to us was critical areas legislation. And I remember when Mayor Schaefer it was Governor Schaefer then, came down to meet with us and explained to us that we needed to get behind him because we needed to do something about the tributaries in the Chesapeake Bay, and we needed to act now, and if we could just approve this, we'll come back and we'll iron out the wrinkles and fix the things that were wrong. And the truth is, no one could comprehend how expansive that change in the law was. And I had people tell me that that's not what it means. That's crazy. You can't just take somebody's property or tell them their smallest lot they can have on the waterfront's 20 acres. But that was what the bill proposed to do, and that's what it did. So it changed, development along the shoreline dramatically. And now the other rules that have gone into place, where you have to set aside 50% of your property for open space and other restrictions. There's so many that I couldn't list them all, but the one that I came across the other day was the FIDS rule, and that's forest interior dwelling species. And if 2 or 3 property owners collectively own 100 acres or more of undisturbed land, they need to submit for a permit in order to develop on their portion that isn't 100 acres. And the fees are rather significant. So you think you know everything, but you really don't. And it's important to have a professional organization that watches out for these things and steps in when they become unreasonable. Well, I've always participated and I've always taken out ads in, the awards banquet pamphlets and done things like that. But I've always been, not looking at it as a competitive advantage. I've looked at it more as, you need to support an organization that provides the framework for your industry. And, our entire industry is built on the exclusive right to sell agreement. If we didn't have that, we wouldn't have anything to work with. And so I think that the board does a good job in safeguarding that and making sure that people are, playing by the rules, but sellers at the same time are given as much information about what they're committing to as possible. So I don't know if that answers the question, but I have participated in this new arrangement since it started, and there's some neat things about it. You get a table. If I'm speaking to other brokers, you get a table with 10 tickets as part of the sponsorship. I think that's a great way of increasing participation at those events, not just the awards banquet, but the other events. You get to speak to the new hires. It helps foster, the good old-fashioned cooperation that, I was talking about before when we had social events that, or broker-manager meetings. I think we should have more of those types of meetings going into the future. And the excess money that would be produced by broader participation in sponsorship could go toward handling those expenses. So, there's a lot of other benefits, but that's, in a nutshell, it's not that much money, and a lot of good comes from it. One of the things that RJ has implemented is this idea about having ad hoc committees where you get people that are really involved in a large number of transactions and supervision issues, and as well as dealing with the day-to-day network. I think it was a really good idea, and I would encourage people not only to sponsor the board, but to participate in those ad hoc committee opportunities. Apart from the volunteer aspect, I think it's almost a requirement that you agree to participate at those meetings. So I'd encourage you.